As was pointed out in this following video, contrary to what atheists may think, methodological naturalism is certainly not the ground rule for all of science. As was also shown in the video, one of the main flaws with presupposing methodological naturalism as the supposed ground rule for all of science is that agent causality, which is something that we all experience firsthand, is ruled out of bounds as a legitimate scientific explanation right off the bat. As Paul Nelson noted, methodological naturalism entails an ontology in which minds are the consequence of physics, and thus can only be placeholders for a more detailed causal account in which physics is the only ultimate actor. You didn't write your email to me, physics did, and informed you of that event after the fact. That's crazy, you reply. I certainly did write my email. Okay then, to what does the pronoun I in that sentence refer? Your personal agency? Your mind? Are you supernatural? George Ellis stated much the same thing when he noted in Albert Einstein's denial of free will that if Einstein did not have free will in some meaningful sense, then he could not have been responsible for discovering the theory of relativity. It would have been a product of the lower level processes, but not of an intelligent mind choosing between possible options. Moreover, in their denial that they have free will, atheists also end up undermining any ability that they might have had to reason in a coherent fashion in the first place, and thus they undermine any claim that they are making a logically coherent argument for their position. In the following article, Martin Cawthron notes that their position is that any mental state, including their position on this issue, is the effect of a physical, not logical cause. By their own logic, it isn't logic that demands their assent to the claim that free will is an illusion, but the prior chemical state of their brains. The only condition under which we could possibly find their arguments convincing is if they are not true. In order to remain logical and not physiological, we must presume a perspective outside the physical order. C.S. Lewis, in what is termed the argument from reason, put the failure inherent to the naturalist worldview like this. One absolute central inconsistency ruins the popular scientific philosophy. The whole picture professes to depend on inferences from observed facts. Unless inference is valid, the whole picture disappears. Unless reason is an absolute, all is in ruins. Yet those who ask me to believe this world picture also ask me to believe that reason is simply the unforeseen and unintended byproduct of mindless matter at one stage of its endless and aimless becoming. Here is a flat contradiction. They ask me at the same moment to accept a conclusion and to discredit the only testimony on which that conclusion can be based. C.S. Lewis called this failure to ground reasoning within the atheist naturalistic worldview the cardinal difficulty of naturalism. In the following article, Lewis further stated that naturalism discredits our processes of reasoning, or at least reduces their credit to such a humble level that it can no longer support naturalism itself. Alvin Plantinga expanded on Lewis's argument from reason with what is termed the evolutionary argument against naturalism, an argument in which Dr. Plantinga has shown that if materialism and Darwinian evolution are true, then our belief-producing faculties will not be reliable. Plantinga further stated that the belief that both materialism and evolution are true is self-refuting. It shoots itself in the foot. Therefore, it can't rationally be held. Simply put, in order for us to be able to reason properly, and thus for us to be able to practice science rationally, then it is necessary for us to assume a perspective that is outside the physical order, an outside perspective of a mind that has the free will that is necessary to make rational judgments about what we are consciously observing in the physical order. Moreover, as these following quotes highlight, many leading Darwinists themselves readily admit to this fatal flaw in the ability to reason properly that is inherent to their naturalistic worldview. In fact, many leading atheists, as these following quotes highlight, also readily admit that it would be impossible for them to live as if they actually had no free will. And although many leading atheists may adamantly claim that they have no free will, they find themselves to be in a position much like the man who claimed to be Napoleon. That is to say, if it is impossible for you to live as if your worldview were actually true, then your worldview cannot possibly reflect reality as it really is, but your worldview must instead be based on a delusion. As to trying to provide actual scientific evidence for their self-refuting belief that they have no free will, but are just mindless automatons, atheists will often invoke the experiments of Benjamin Libet from the early 1980s. Yet Libet himself was a strong defender of free will, and he interpreted his own experiments as validating free will. Moreover, despite the widespread false belief on the internet that Libet's experimental work supported a deterministic brain, the experimental work of Libet has now been re-examined in finer experimental detail and found to be contrary to their belief in a deterministic brain. Specifically, it has now been found that a person's decisions are not at the mercy of unconscious and early brain waves. People are able to actively intervene in the decision-making process and interrupt a movement. Previously, people have used the preparatory brain signals to argue against free will. Our study now shows that the freedom is much less limited than previously thought. contrary to the atheist erroneous belief that science has somehow proven that he has no free will. The fact of the matter is that the assumption of free will was necessary for the founding of modern science. In the following article, it is noted that the Christian view of reality was necessary for the founding of modern science, a view of reality which came to dominate Europe during the Middle Ages, a view of reality which entailed that the cosmos was seen as contingent in its existence and thus dependent on a divine choice which called it into being. The universe is also rational, and so a coherent discourse can be made about it. Indeed, the contingency and rationality of the cosmos are like two pillars supporting the Christian vision of the cosmos. And in the following article, Dr. Scambray reveals that science arose from the medieval insistence on the rationality of God, from which it follows that humans' minds created in that image are capable of understanding nature. And Dr. Scambray also reveals that in the year 1225, a bishop and theologian wrote a treatise that describes the birth of the universe, 4 centuries before Newton proposed gravity and 7 centuries before the Big Bang Theory. Thus, the assumption of free will on God's part to bring the universe into existence, and also the assumption of free will on our part in the belief that we have minds that are made in the image of God, was necessary for the founding of modern science. Moreover, evidence from general relativity and cosmology now verifies what Christians have held to be true all along. Specifically, modern science now reveals that the entire universe, all space-time and matter-energy of the universe, is indeed contingent in its existence, just as the Christian founders of modern science had presupposed. Specifically, evidence from general relativity and cosmology now reveals that the universe has not always existed as naturalists had presupposed, but that the entire universe had a beginning in the Big Bang approximately 14 billion years ago. These following references make this point clear. Moreover, not only is the universe shown to be contingent in the fact that the universe had a beginning, but quantum mechanics now reveals that the universe is also contingent in its continual moment-by-moment existence. These following references make this point clear. To put it simply, and as Dr. Bruce Gordon succinctly states in the following article, the scientific evidence itself from both general relativity and quantum mechanics now reveals that the physical universe is causally incomplete and therefore neither self-originating nor self-sustaining, and also reveals that the world of space-time, matter, and energy is dependent on a reality that transcends space-time, matter, and energy. Moreover, the transcendent reality on which our universe depends must be something that can exhibit agency, a mind that can choose among the infinite variety of mathematical descriptions and bring into existence a reality that corresponds to a consistent subset of them. To further solidify the claim that free will must be foundational within reality in order for us to be able to coherently practice modern science in the first place, quantum mechanics, with what is termed the uncertainty principle, has now undermined the atheist claim that the universe is completely deterministic. Furthermore, as if the uncertainty principle was not bad enough for undermining the atheist's deterministic view of reality, Anton Soares notes that rather than looking at quantum physics as a model for explaining free will, one should look at free will as a primitive principle for explaining why the laws of nature are quantum. Moreover, at the 7-minute mark of the following video, Anton Zeilinger weighs in and states, "We know that it is wrong to assume that the features of the system which we observe in a measurement exist prior to measurement. What we perceive as reality now depends on our earlier decision what to measure, which is a very, very deep message about the nature of reality and our part in the whole universe. We are not just passive observers." And in the following experiment, the claim that past material states determine future conscious choices, determinism, is directly falsified by the fact that present conscious choices are, in fact, affecting past material states. Specifically, as the researchers in the article stated, quantum mechanics can even mimic an influence of future actions on past events. In other words, if my conscious choices really are just merely the result of whatever state the material particles of my brain happen to be in the past, deterministic, then how in blue blazes is it remotely possible for my present choices and actions to affect the state of material particles into the past? The atheistic belief that the universe is completely deterministic and that we therefore have no free will is directly falsified by this experiment. John Wheeler's original delayed choice experiment is also very good for highlighting free will's primary role in quantum mechanics. The following article highlights John Wheeler's original thought experiment, where our choice to measure whether a photon passes by one side of a galaxy or by the other side of the galaxy is delayed for billions of years. And yet, paradoxically, our later choice determines which side of the galaxy the light passed, so to speak, billions of years ago. John Wheeler's thought experiment for the delayed choice experiment has now recently, as of October 2017, been experimentally verified for thousands of kilometers in space. And here's another variation of Wheeler's delayed choice experiment that was done with atoms instead of photons. The results of the experiment were so startling that lead researcher Andrew Truscott remarked, "It proves that measurement is everything. At the quantum level, reality does not exist if you are not looking at it." And Truscott further remarked, the atoms did not travel from A to B. It was only when they were measured at the end of the journey that their wave-like or particle-like behavior was brought into existence. Steven Weinberg, in an article entitled The Trouble with Quantum Mechanics, states free will's primary role within quantum mechanics as such. If we regard the whole process of measurement as being governed by the equations of quantum mechanics, and these equations are perfectly deterministic, how do probabilities get into quantum mechanics? In quantum mechanics, these probabilities do not exist until people choose what to measure, such as the spin in one or another direction. Unlike the case of classical physics, a choice must be made. It should also be noted that Weinberg, who is himself an atheist, nonetheless rejects decoherence in many worlds as a rational explanation for quantum mechanics. But it is interesting to note exactly why he rejects the theistic, friendly, instrumentalist approach to quantum mechanics. Specifically, Weinberg rejects the instrumentalist approach to quantum mechanics since it incorporates free will as a primary axiom in quantum mechanics, and since humans are therefore brought into the laws of nature at the most fundamental level. Weinberg further objects to the instrumentalist approach in that the instrumentalist approach turns its back on a vision that became possible after Darwin of a world governed by impersonal physical laws that control human behavior along with everything else. There are two major problems with Weinberg's contention that quantum mechanics undermines Darwin's goal of trying to explain humans as purely the result of the laws of nature. The first major problem with Weinberg's contention is that no one has ever been able to discover what these so-called natural laws of evolution are within the known physical universe. As Ernst Mayr himself conceded, there are no known natural laws in biology corresponding to the natural laws of the physical sciences. And here are a few more references that make this point clear about there being no so-called universal laws of biology as far as Darwinian evolution itself is concerned. The second major problem with Weinberg's rejection of humans being brought into the laws of nature at their most fundamental level, in other words, the second major problem with Weinberg's rejection of free will as a primary axiom within quantum mechanics, is that if Weinberg truly believes that he has no free will, and he believes that all of his thoughts and all of his actions are somehow solely the result of the laws of nature, then exactly who or what discovered the standard model, Weinberg or the laws of nature? Surely, Weinberg does not really believe that he had no input whatsoever in discovering this standard model. If he does believe that he had no input whatsoever, then I would suggest Weinberg edit Wikipedia to erase his name from the entry. It is also interesting to note that some people have gone to great lengths to try to explain away the findings from quantum mechanics which validate the reality of our free will. They have done this by postulating a far-fetched scenario in which it is held a particle detector's settings may conspire with events in the shared causal past of the detectors themselves to determine which properties of the particle to measure. A scenario that, however far-fetched, implies that a physicist running the experiment does not have complete free will in choosing each detector's setting. But Anton Zeilinger's lab closed this supposed free will loophole by using the light from distant stars to show that the universe would have had to delete items from the menu of possible measurement settings at least 600 years before the measurements occurred. As one of the lead researchers remarked, in order to deny free will, now one needs the correlations to have been established even before Shakespeare wrote, "Until I know this sure uncertainty, I'll entertain the offered fallacy." Zeilinger's lab plans to refine this test even further, pushing the so-called free will loophole back billions of years, perhaps pushing the loophole all the way back to the cosmic background radiation itself. Moreover, due to these recent and forthcoming advances in quantum mechanics, the atheist is now forced to claim that our choices, if they are determined, instead of being determined by the present state of the material particles of our brain, as atheists had originally claimed, is now forced to claim that our choices were somehow super-determined, hundreds or even billions of years ago. It is also interesting to note, in the atheist attempt to avoid having to admit that free will is integral to quantum mechanics, that the atheist ends up falsifying his claim Darwinian evolution is truly random. That is to say, if our most minute choices that we are making in the present moment were somehow super determined billions of years ago, then nothing else on Earth, including how all life came to be on Earth, is ever to be considered the result of a purely unguided random process, as is held in Darwinian evolution, but it is instead to be considered to be the result of a quote-unquote super-determined process. Moreover, if you truly believe that all your choices and all your actions in your life were somehow super-determined billions of years ago, then I say welcome to Christianity. Strict Calvinists have, for centuries, been pretty much arguing for a super-deterministic view of reality all along. A view of reality in which they claim they have no free will, and they regard everything that happens, including their own salvation, to have been predestined by God. Here is a sermon by Tim Keller that gets the Calvinist predestination position across very well. Of personal note, since puppets cannot truly love anyone, and since true love cannot be forced upon anyone, then I hold free will to be far more integral in developing a loving relationship with God and in our salvation than many Calvinists would care to admit. Moreover, it is important to point out that although free will is often thought of as allowing someone to choose between a veritable infinity of options, in the theistic view of reality, that veritable infinity of options all boils down to just two options in the end: eternal life, infinity if you will, with God, or eternal life, infinity again if you will, without God. C.S. Lewis states the two ultimate options that we all have to face someday as such. There are only two kinds of people in the end: those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says in the end, "Thy will be done." All that are in hell chose it. Without that self-choice, there could be no hell. A final note to the reality of heaven and hell and the importance of each of us freely accepting Jesus Christ into our lives. Although, as was shown in this following video, atheists have no compelling evidence for all the various parallel universe scenarios that they have put forth. In fact, as was also shown in the video, there is fairly strong evidence that can be mustered against their various claims for parallel universes. Christians, on the other hand, do not suffer from such an embarrassing lack of empirical support for their beliefs in heaven and hell, but can appeal directly to quantum mechanics, special relativity, and general relativity, support their belief that God, number one, upholds this universe in its continual existence, and to, number two, support their belief in a heavenly dimension and in a hellish dimension. Moreover, when the agent causality of God is rightly let back into the picture of modern physics, as the Christian founders of modern physics originally envisioned, and as needs to be done, as hopefully has been made abundantly clear in this video thus far, then Jesus Christ's resurrection from the dead provides us with an empirically backed reconciliation between quantum mechanics and general relativity into the much sought after theory of everything. This following video goes over some of the evidence surrounding that particular claim. Well, that is the end of the video. Thanks very much for watching, and again, I remind viewers that all papers and videos referenced in this video may be accessed in the link provided in the video description. Thanks again for watching.